All right, so get this. Imagine having the actual recipe, right, for like a cutting-edge language model. Not just the finished product, no, but like the ingredients, the steps, the reasoning behind each decision.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. The TÜLU 3 project.
Yeah, TÜLU 3.
It's a breath of fresh air, honestly, in the field. They've created this whole family of open source language models that can truly compete, outperforming some pretty big names we're all familiar with.
You know those closed source models that everyone always talks about?
Oh, yeah.
But here's the kicker, right? They've released their entire process.
Everything.
Like the data, the code, even their evaluations.
It's a goldmine, and that's why this deep dive is going to be so fascinating, I think, for anyone listening. We're not just looking at a model, we're unpacking a whole philosophy of development here.
It's like a masterclass in open source AI.
Exactly.
Okay, so for folks who are, maybe hearing about TÜLU 3 for the first time, what sets this apart from like previous open source language model projects?
I'd say the ambition is different. Previous efforts have been impressive, for sure, but they've often focused on, replicating existing capabilities.
Like catching up.
Yeah, catching up. But TÜLU 3, they're setting their sights higher, they're aiming for state-of-the-art performance, and this is the key, openly sharing how they did it.
It was like they're inviting everyone to learn from their playbook.
Exactly.
Okay, so speaking of playbooks, let's talk about their training process. It's multi-stage, which sounds familiar, but there's something more to it, right?
No, absolutely. It's not just about piling on more and more data. They've very deliberately designed the sequence of steps. Each step has a specific purpose, and it all starts with a base Llama model.
Okay, Llama, that's that open source model from Meta, right?
That's the one.
Got it. So what happens next? Is it the usual like instruction tuning that we've seen in other projects?
Instruction tuning is definitely a part of the picture, but even there, TÜLU 3 does things a bit differently.
Oh.
Yeah. They use this technique called supervised fine-tuning, SFT for short, but they're incredibly deliberate about the data they use for this. Think of it like carefully curating a curriculum for the model.
So it's not just like a fire hose of information.
Oh, no fire hose here. They handpick data sets based on, the specific skills they want the model to learn. So, for example, they use wild chat, which is full of real back and forth human model interactions.
That's got to be useful.
It is. It helps the model learn that more natural conversational language. And then on top of that, they have these specialized data sets for things like math or coding.
Interesting. So they're being really selective about what they feed the model. That's different from that whole more data is always better approach we've seen before, right?
100%. It's quality over quantity here, and they take it a step further.
Do they ever?
They do, with something they call decontamination. So they meticulously scrub their data sets to make sure there's no overlap with common evaluation benchmarks.
That seems smart.
It is. It lets them really accurately assess the model's true capabilities.
So the training data itself is already a departure from how things were done before. But after this SFT, what's next in the multi-stage process?
Well, once the model's got a good grasp on, instructions and different types of tasks, they move on to preference fine-tuning.
Preference fine-tuning. This is where the AI develops its own tastes, right? Like learns what a good output is supposed to look like.
You got it. They use direct preference optimization, DPO, which basically boils down to showing the model two different responses for the same prompt, and then asking which one's better.
So instead of just blindly learning from the data, the model's now being guided towards these more desirable outputs.
Yeah, exactly. And get this, they didn't just use human preferences for this. No, they also got really clever. They had different models, including their own SFT models, compete against each other.
It's like a language model showdown.
Right. This helped them collect even more preference data, which then further refined the model's output.
So even in this preference tuning stage, we're already seeing this really unique approach that's like different from the standard methods.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So what comes after this model face-off? What's the next step?
Next, they introduced this truly innovative technique. It's called RLVR, reinforcement learning with verifiable rewards. RLVR. This is where things get particularly interesting, especially for those tasks that have a clear right or wrong answer.
Like
math or coding.
So this RLVR is like a super strict teacher, right? Grading the model's every move.
Huh. I like that. That's a great analogy. Instead of just providing general feedback, the model only gets rewarded if its output actually passes a specific test. So imagine, instead of saying, hey, that's a pretty good poem, you say, okay, your code compiled correctly, and it produced the expected result. Good job.
So less about style points, more about demonstrable results.
Yeah.
I'm guessing this has a big impact on how the model actually learns.
Huge impact. It pushes the model to be more precise, more reliable, particularly for those tasks where accuracy is paramount.
So this entire training process, it really does sound like this carefully orchestrated symphony, each stage building upon the previous one. But how do they actually measure if this whole unique approach is successful? How do they know it's working?
That brings us to their evaluation methods. And honestly, these are just as insightful as their training techniques. They didn't just settle for, the usual benchmarks.
So they weren't content with just ticking boxes and calling it a day?
Not at all. They wanted to make sure their model could truly generalize, to perform well on tasks that it had never even seen before. They went so far as to develop their own evaluation toolkit.
Which they named?
They named it Olmus.
Olmus. Okay, catchy. And this toolkit, it's open source as well, I assume.
Of course. Everything about TÜLU 3 is about transparency and collaboration.
This level of openness is honestly incredibly exciting. It's like they're pulling back the curtain on the entire process, allowing, others to learn, to adapt, to build upon their work.
It's a testament to their belief in the power of open source development. And it's truly refreshing to see, honestly.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from their very unique data selection process to these innovative training techniques and these rigorous evaluation methods. It's clear that TÜLU 3 is doing things very differently. But what makes these differences so significant, in the grand scheme of language model development? Why should people care about this?
That's a great question, and one that I think deserves a deeper dive. So let's take a short break and come back to really explore the implications of TÜLU 3's unconventional approach and what it means for the future of AI.
We're back and ready to unpack why TÜLU 3's different approach is such a big deal. Because it's not just about the cool tech, right? It has implications for how we even think about language models going forward.
Yeah, definitely. TÜLU 3, it kind of challenges some of those fundamental assumptions in the field. I mean, for a long time, the focus has been on building bigger and bigger models.
Bigger is better, right?
Yeah, and feeding them these massive data sets and hoping that, something magical happens.
Throw enough data at it and
Yeah.
emergent intelligence will just poof, appear.
Exactly. But TÜLU 3 shows that a more nuanced approach can be surprisingly effective. They carefully select and prepare their data. They implement this multi-stage training process with very distinct goals for each stage. And with all of that, they've managed to get some pretty remarkable results.
And all with a relatively smaller model too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's they're saying bigger isn't always better. It's about understanding the nuances, the specific techniques that can unlock the true potential of these models.
Right. And this has some pretty big implications for the accessibility of AI in general. I mean, if you don't need mountains of data and all this massive computing power to create a really high-performing language model, it opens up the field to a lot more people, right?
Absolutely. A much wider range of researchers, developers, anyone can get involved.
It democratizes AI, so to speak. Which brings us back to, that whole open source nature of TÜLU 3. They're not just sharing their results.
No.
They're sharing their entire process.
The whole thing.
And that's really where the true power of this project lies.
Yeah.
It's not just about giving people a cool new tool.
It's about giving them the knowledge.
Yeah. It's about empowering them to understand how that tool even works, to adapt it, to build upon it.
Exactly.
So let's talk applications for a sec. What are some of the potential things people can actually do with TÜLU 3 that maybe they couldn't do before?
Well, the possibilities are pretty vast. Imagine a student, right, who's struggling with a complex research paper.
Oh, I've been there.
They could use TÜLU 3 to help them summarize these dense academic articles to extract those key findings, maybe even help them brainstorm arguments.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely useful for students. What about someone who's not in academia? How would they use it?
Okay, let's say you're, I don't know, a small business owner, and you need to analyze customer feedback. Well, TÜLU 3 can help you sift through all of that, all those reviews, identify trends, even generate reports with some really actionable insights.
So it's like having a super-powered research assistant.
Yeah. Available 24/7.
And because it's open source, there's no need to worry about API costs or usage limits or any of that stuff.
Nope. Download it, play with it, fine-tune it to your needs.
It all sounds super promising,
Yeah.
but it's important to remember that language models, even the advanced ones like TÜLU 3, they're still tools at the end of the day.
Tools, yeah.
They're not magic solutions to every problem.
Right. They have limitations. They can be biased. They can make mistakes, and, they can definitely be misused. So it's crucial to, use them responsibly, critically evaluate the outputs, all of that.
Speaking of responsibility, one thing that really impressed me about the TÜLU 3 project was their commitment to, transparency. And not just in terms of their code and their data, but also in acknowledging the potential risks of large language models.
Oh, absolutely. They dedicate a big chunk of their report to talking about those risks.
Mm.
Everything from the spread of misinformation to the potential for malicious use. And they even go so far as to outline how they try to mitigate those risks throughout the development process.
It's refreshing to see that,
Yeah.
that level of honesty and awareness,
Yeah.
especially in a field that's, often driven by so much hype and competition.
It really sets a new standard for ethical AI development. And, by being so open about their process, they're inviting everyone to participate in the conversation and help find solutions.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that the future of AI isn't something that's just happening to us.
No.
It's something that we're building together.
100%.
And projects like TÜLU 3 show that we can actually create these really powerful AI tools while also being mindful of the potential consequences and striving for a more open and collaborative approach.
For sure.
It's not just about the tech itself. It's about the values that we embed in that tech. Transparency, responsibility, collaboration, those are the principles that should guide AI development. And honestly, TÜLU 3 is a great example of how to put those principles into practice.
Well said. And the beautiful thing is, this openness allows for continuous improvement. As more people experiment with TÜLU 3, as they identify the strengths and the weaknesses, the models themselves will continue to evolve and improve.
It's like this virtuous cycle of learning and development fueled by collaboration and a shared commitment to advancing AI in a responsible and beneficial way.
Yeah. Exactly. And for our listeners who are maybe eager to jump in and start playing with TÜLU 3, we've included a bunch of links to the project's website, their GitHub repo, all sorts of goodies in the show notes.
Yeah, go forth and download the models, experiment, break things, build things, see what amazing things you can create. You never know, maybe your next failure will actually lead to the next big breakthrough.
Exactly. And we'll be right here to explore it with you on the deep dive.
This deep dive has given us, a taste of what TÜLU 3 has to offer, but there's a whole universe of possibilities out there waiting to be discovered. One thing that really stood out to me in their report was how much they actually learned from the things that didn't work.
For sure, sometimes knowing what not to do is just as valuable as knowing what to do. And the TÜLU 3 team, they were incredibly open about sharing those lessons.
So stick around as we take a closer look at some of those insightful failures and what they reveal about the evolving landscape of language model development. We often, we celebrate those breakthroughs in AI, those moments where a model suddenly achieves something amazing.
Big headlines.
Yeah, big headline. But what about the paths not taken, the experiments that didn't quite pan out?
That's where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. The TÜLU 3 team, they didn't shy away from sharing their quote-unquote failures. And by doing that, they actually provided some really valuable insights for the whole AI community, really.
It's like they're saying, hey, we tried this, it didn't work, but here's what we learned from it so you don't have to make the same mistakes.
Right. Learn from our misadventures.
Exactly. So one of those insightful failures involved this technique they called regeneration.
Oh, yeah. Regeneration.
Regeneration. Okay, so what was the idea behind that?
So they wanted to see if they could improve the model's performance by giving it a chance to essentially, redo its answers.
Yeah.
So if the model wasn't happy with its first output, it could just try again and hopefully, generate something better on the second try.
So a built-in do-over for the AI. I can see how that could lead to some interesting results.
Yeah, you would think so, right?
Yeah.
But surprisingly, it didn't really work out that way.
Really? Why not? I'm kind of curious to know what happened there.
So it turns out that more often than not, the model's initial response was actually the best one. The regeneration process, it sometimes led to overthinking, or it even introduced new errors. It's the model got caught in this loop, second-guessing itself instead of just trusting its instincts.
So even for an AI, sometimes it's better to go with your gut, that first gut feeling.
It seems that way. And this finding highlights a really crucial point. More complex isn't always better. Sometimes, a simpler approach can be more effective. The key is to just, constantly experiment, try different techniques to rigorously evaluate what actually works.
And that's what makes the TÜLU 3 project so valuable, right?
Right.
They've done a lot of that heavy lifting, they've explored all these different avenues, and they've openly shared their findings.
Mm.
The good, the bad, the successes, the failures, everything.
And that's huge for the research community,
Yeah.
It's saving others time and effort, preventing them from going down those same dead ends.
This whole spirit of transparency and collaboration is really inspiring. It kind of like underscores the idea that AI development should be this collective endeavor.
Yeah.
You know,
It should be. We all have a role to play in this, in shaping the future of AI. And by embracing these open source principles, by sharing what we know, by learning from each other's experiences, we can make sure that AI develops in a way that benefits everyone.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into this fascinating world of TÜLU 3, what's like the key takeaway for our listeners?
I'd say the biggest lesson is that the future of AI is open. It's about breaking down those barriers. It's about fostering that collaboration. And it's about empowering a really diverse community, researchers, developers, enthusiasts, all working together, to push the boundaries of what's possible.
And TÜLU 3 is like the perfect example of this open future, right?
Yeah.
It's a testament to the power of transparency, of innovation, and of a shared commitment to building a better world, honestly, with AI.
Well said. And to all our listeners out there, we really encourage you. Explore TÜLU 3, experiment with it, create something new, share those discoveries.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe your next failure will be the spark for the next big leap forward in AI.
It could be.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of the world of AI.